The morning sun cast long shadows across the sprawling Walmart parking lot in Homestead, Florida. Linda Carroll, her face a roadmap of 56 years etched with a grief that never fully subsided, pushed her shopping cart through the produce section. The methodical selection of tomatoes, the careful examination of lettuce heads, it was a ritual, a small, controllable act in a life that had spun out of her grasp 12 years ago. The routine helped fill the empty spaces, the hollowed-out caverns in her heart that had gaped wide since that sweltering summer day in 1985 when her only daughter, Melissa, had vanished. The shrill, unfamiliar ring of her cell phone, a relatively new possession in 1997, won from a supermarket lottery, startled her from her thoughts. She fumbled in the worn leather of her purse, nearly dropping a bag of oranges in the process. "Hello. Mrs. Carroll, this is Detective Jason Pram from the Homestead Police Department. I need to ask where you are right now." Linda's heart performed a painful, skipping beat. In 12 years, she had received countless calls, from cranks, from well-meaning friends with flimsy theories, from officers in other states following dead-end leads. But something in the detective's tone, a grim finality, made her grip the phone tighter, her knuckles white. "I'm at Walmart, doing my grocery shopping. Why? What's happened?" "Mrs. Carroll, we need you to come to Everglades National Park. Something related to your daughter, Melissa, and her husband, Brandon, has just resurfaced." The words hit her like a physical blow. The phone nearly slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers. "What is it? What have you found?" "We've recovered their yellow Ford Thunderbird from the Everglades. We need you for identification purposes. We've also contacted the Whitmore family. Can you meet us at the park parking lot via Main Park Road?" The car. After all this time, Linda's voice cracked. "What's the car? I'll be there in 20 minutes." Without a second thought, she abandoned her half-filled cart in the middle of the aisle. Other shoppers stared, their expressions a mixture of annoyance and curiosity, as she rushed past. Linda barely noticed. Her mind raced, a frantic slideshow of memories, as she hurried to her aging Honda Civic. The 20-minute drive to Everglades National Park felt both endless and too brief. As she navigated Main Park Road, the familiar landscape of sawgrass and cypress trees blurred into an impressionistic smear. Memories flooded back, memories she had tried so hard to reconcile over the years. The police, kind but firm, had concluded that Melissa had left town voluntarily with Brandon after their wedding. It was, they'd insisted, the only reasonable explanation. A young couple, deeply in love, escaping the pressures of their disparate families. She had never truly believed it. Not her Melissa. Her daughter wouldn't abandon her, not after everything they'd been through together. Melissa knew the sacrifices Linda had made as a single mother, the double shifts, the worn-out shoes, the quiet pride in every small victory. But 12 years of deafening silence had worn down even her stubborn hope. She had begun to make a fragile, brittle peace with the idea that perhaps her daughter had chosen a new life, a life of wealth and ease, over their old one. Now, with this discovery, that carefully constructed peace crumbled like wet sand. The sight that greeted her at the park made her breath catch in her throat. Multiple police vehicles crowded the parking lot, their emergency lights creating a silent, strobing kaleidoscope of red and blue against the bright morning sky. Rescue authority vehicles, their logos stark and official, added to the controlled chaos. Park rangers directed traffic while officers cordoned off sections with yellow tape. Linda parked hastily and stepped out on unsteady legs. A crowd had gathered, park employees, curious tourists in shorts and sun hats, officials in various uniforms. But her eyes were drawn to the flatbed trailer at the center of it all. There it sat, the yellow Ford Thunderbird, Streams of murky brown water still dripped from its undercarriage, pooling on the asphalt. A thick cake of algae and mud coated its once pristine surface, and the windows were opaque with years of accumulated sediment. But even through 12 years of submersion, she recognized it. Gregory Whitmore, Brandon's father, had made such a pompous production of gifting it to them for their wedding, insisting on dozens of photos with the happy couple beaming beside it. Mrs. Carroll? Detective Pram approached, his weathered face grave. He was younger than she'd expected from his phone voice, perhaps in his early 40s, with the kind of tired, empathetic eyes that came from seeing too much human misery. Detective. She couldn't take her eyes off the car. How did you find it after all this time? Let me introduce you to some people who can explain better than I can. He led her to a small cluster of young people wearing University of Miami shirts. They looked barely older than Melissa had been when she disappeared. A young man with sandy hair and earnest, intelligent eyes stepped forward. Mrs. Carroll, I'm Jake Morrison. We're environmental studies students. We're working on a project about land transformation in the Everglades, analyzing historical satellite imagery to track changes over the decades. He pulled out a folder and extracted a grainy, pixelated photograph. We were studying land loss patterns when we noticed this anomaly in a 1985 satellite image. He pointed to a section of the photo where Linda could just make out a faint, unnatural yellow shape partially visible in a dark patch of water. When we enhanced and zoomed the image, we could clearly see it was a vehicle. Our professor, who's from around here, remembered the old missing persons case. It was big news back then, so we calculated the coordinates and contacted the police. Detective Pram took over. The area where they spotted it is extremely remote, accessible only by a small, overgrown service canal. It's not a place anyone would just stumble upon. The water depth there is significant, deep enough for a car to sink completely. Over time, it settled to the bottom, hidden by the dark, tannic water. The recovery operation took 4 hours. Our marine recovery team, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and our department worked together. We used sonar to confirm the car's exact position, then brought in a police boat to reach the location. A helicopter lifted it out and placed it on the flatbed. The sound of car doors slamming behind her made Linda turn. The Whitmore family was arriving. Gregory led the way, his characteristic swagger undiminished by his advancing years. Eleanor followed, draped in her perpetual air of long-suffering dignity, and their younger son, Daniel, brought up the rear. The years had changed them all, but the old dynamics were instantly recognizable. A hot flare of anger rose in Linda's chest. She remembered their last interaction all too well, Gregory's thinly veiled accusations, his insistence that her low-income daughter had somehow led his precious son astray, as if love could be measured by bank accounts. Detective Pram excused himself to brief the Whitmores. Linda watched Gregory's face as he examined the ruined vehicle. She saw the flicker of recognition, the tightening of his jaw, despite his attempt at stoic control. "Yes, that's the Thunderbird I bought Brandon as a wedding gift," Gregory confirmed, his voice carrying clearly across the lot. "The license plate matches, FTB 1985. I had it specially requested for them. Ford Thunderbird 1985. Linda approached, unable to help herself. "What did you recover from inside?" The detective's expression grew more somber. "No remains were found, no blood evidence or signs of a struggle that we could detect, given the extensive water damage. The only personal item we recovered was this." He signaled to an officer, who brought over a clear evidence bag containing a small, tarnished silver lighter. Gregory reached into his own pocket and produced an identical, though polished, lighter. "This is mine. That one must be Brandon's. We bought them together at a shop in Miami. Christmas, 1984. Eleanor's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. Her hand flew to her throat, a gesture of pure shock. "Detective, what does this mean? If they're not in the car, where are they? What happens now?" "Mrs. Whitmore," Pram said, his voice gentle but firm. "I don't believe your son and daughter-in-law would deliberately dispose of their vehicle, especially not a valuable wedding gift, in the Everglades. Someone did this to them in 1985 and tried to eliminate the evidence. This is no longer just a missing persons case. It's potentially a criminal investigation." "Criminal?" Eleanor's voice was a horrified whisper. "You mean someone might have killed them?" "We're exploring all possibilities, but whoever did this knew the area well. They knew exactly where the deep water was, how to access this remote location. This suggests someone local." Gregory's face flushed a deep, angry red. "Before you waste taxpayer money on wild theories, you need to send divers back out there. Search for bodies. They might still be underwater." "Our dive teams are conducting expanded grid pattern searches as we speak, Mr. Whitmore." Gregory turned abruptly to Daniel, his voice dropping but still audible to those nearby. "This is why it's important to never marry into desperation. Poor girls will either ruin your name or get you destroyed, just like what happened to your brother." "Dad!" Daniel's shock was evident. "You know how much Brandon loved Melissa. She would never—" Linda's controls snapped. "Are you still trying to blame my daughter after all these years?" Gregory rounded on her, his eyes blazing. "She might have had connections, old boyfriends, gang members from her neighborhood, someone who got jealous and decided to eliminate my son to get to her." "Gang members?" Linda's voice rose, trembling with rage. "If my daughter just wanted your money, she wouldn't have disappeared with your son. She would have stayed here to collect it. Don't you dare!" Gregory stepped forward aggressively. "Your son is the one who lured her away from her purity promise," Linda shot back, the old wound raw and fresh. "She wanted to wait until marriage, but he convinced her otherwise. That's why they had to marry so young. Melissa was only 24. The argument escalated rapidly, a torrent of grief and class-fueled animosity. Voices rose, accusations flew, other visitors stopped to stare. Officers moved to intervene, creating a physical barrier between the feuding families. "That's enough," Detective Pram's authoritative voice cut through the chaos. "This behavior helps no one. You're both grieving, both confused. I understand that, but throwing accusations won't bring us any answers." He gently guided Linda away from the confrontation. "Mrs. Carroll, please, everyone's emotions are running high. Don't let him provoke you." "He's painting my daughter as some kind of criminal," Linda said, her voice shaking with rage and unshed tears. "My baby girl who sang in the church choir, who volunteered at the food bank." "I know. We'll review everything back at the station. For now, I need you to go home and try to rest. I'll contact you immediately if there are any developments. Can you drive yourself, or would you like an officer to escort you?" Linda took several deep, shuddering breaths, trying to center herself. "I can drive, I need a moment." She walked to her car on unsteady legs, slumping into the driver's seat. Through her windshield, she could see the Whitmores still clustered around the flatbed trailer, Gregory gesticulating wildly as he spoke to the officers. The sight of him, still so arrogant, still so certain of his own righteousness, made her stomach turn. She turned the key in the ignition and pulled out of the lot, leaving the circus behind. But she couldn't leave the image of that water-stained yellow car, or the terrible questions it raised about what really happened on that long-ago summer day. Linda's small house felt impossibly quiet as she closed the front door behind her. The adrenaline from the morning's confrontation drained away, leaving her feeling hollow and shaky. Almost without conscious thought, her feet carried her down the narrow hallway to Melissa's room. She hadn't been inside for months. Most days, the pain was too much to bear. The door creaked as she pushed it open. A musty, stagnant smell immediately assaulted her nostrils. 12 years of neglect had taken their toll. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through yellowed curtains. The cheerful floral wallpaper she and Melissa had picked out together was now faded and peeling at the corners. Everything remained exactly as Melissa had left it that June morning in 1985, makeup scattered on the dresser, a romance novel face down on the nightstand, her favorite sundress draped over the desk chair. But time had not been kind. The clothes in the open closet were spotted with mold, the fabric degraded, the stuffed animals on the bed were matted with dust, their button eyes dull. "Oh, baby girl," Linda whispered, her throat tight. She threw open the windows, letting fresh air chase away the staleness. Then, with a new and sudden resolve, she fetched cleaning supplies and cardboard boxes from the garage. If the police were reopening the investigation, they might need to examine Melissa's belongings. And perhaps it was time. Time to finally pack away these physical reminders of her loss. She started with the closet, carefully removing each item. Her hands shook as she folded Melissa's high school graduation dress, remembering how proud her daughter had looked. As she cleared the top shelf, her hands encountered items that didn't belong to Melissa: a man's watch, a University of Miami sweater, a bottle of cologne. Brandon's things. Linda's jaw tightened. She'd known he stayed over sometimes, despite her objections. Brandon Whitmore, handsome, charming, wealthy, had swept Melissa off her feet, and look where it had led them. She fetched another box and began packing Brandon's belongings, labeling it clearly: Brandon Whitmore. Personal items. The cleaning took hours. By the time she finished, her back ached and her hands were raw, but Melissa's room, though still a shrine, was a clean one. Linda loaded Brandon's box into her Honda. The Whitmores lived in the exclusive Gables Estates, a world away from her modest neighborhood. Making a sudden decision, she started the car. The Whitmore estate sat behind an imposing iron gate, a Mediterranean-style mansion of stucco and terracotta. As she pulled up, Gregory emerged from the garage, heading to his Mercedes. His face darkened the instant he saw her. "What the hell are you doing here?" he boomed. "You're blocking the gate. You're not welcome on this property." Linda held up the box. "I'm just returning Brandon's belongings. They were in Melissa's room." "Then leave it there." He gestured dismissively at the ground. "Someone will deal with it. Now move your pathetic car." Fighting the urge to throw the box at his head, Linda set it carefully on the pristine driveway and pulled her car forward. Gregory lowered his window as he passed. "When I return, I don't want to see you or your piece of junk car anywhere near my property. Understood?" He sped off without waiting for a response. It bothered her, leaving Brandon's things like unwanted garbage. She got out again, retrieved the box, and rang the front doorbell. Daniel answered, looking surprised. "Mrs. Carroll?" "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, holding out the box. "I just wanted to make sure someone actually received these." "Actually?" Daniel stepped aside. "Mum and I were just going through Brandon's room ourselves. There's something you should see. Please, come in." Against her better judgment, Linda followed him inside. Eleanor looked up from a box, her usual composed expression softened. "Linda, thank you for bringing these." "Of course," Linda said, setting her box down. She noticed a smaller box filled with items she recognized as Melissa's. "This is what we wanted to show you," Daniel said, picking up an ornate black velvet box from Brandon's desk. Linda accepted it. Inside, Nestled in white satin lay an expensive-looking lingerie set of black lace. A small card was tucked into the lid. In bold, masculine handwriting, it read, "From Otis." Otis? Linda looked up, puzzled. I don't know anyone named Otis. Melissa never mentioned him. Neither do we, Eleanor said. We found it in Brandon's closet, hidden behind some shoes. They stared at the intimate gift, all thinking the same thing. If a man named Otis had given this to Melissa, why did Brandon have it? It's brand new, Daniel observed, pointing to the intact tags. Never worn. The price tag says $200. That was a lot of money in 1985. Why would Brandon keep this? Linda asked, her mind racing. That's what we can't understand, Eleanor said. Brandon was the jealous type. He would have confronted this Otis person, not hidden the evidence. We need to take this to Detective Pram, Linda said decisively. I agree, Daniel said. I'll come with you. As they prepared to leave, they heard the rumble of Gregory's Mercedes pulling back into the driveway. Your father's back already, Linda said, her stomach dropping. Gregory was out of his car before the engine died, his face flushed. What is she still doing here? Daniel, what are you doing with this woman? Dad, calm down. We found something important, Daniel said, holding up a bag containing the velvet box. Gregory snatched it, his expression shifting from anger to disgust as he saw the lingerie. You're taking this to the police? Look at the card, Linda interjected. It's from someone named Otis. Gregory's hesitation was brief, but Linda saw it. How would I know every person my son associated with? He snapped. We're taking it to the police, Daniel said, with finality. Fine, but I'm coming with you, Gregory said, pocketing his keys. And I'm driving. At the station, a young officer named Martinez logged the velvet box into evidence. This is from Eloise's boutique in Coral Gables, he noted, examining the tags. High-end place. They might have old purchase records. Throughout the process, Gregory's phone rang repeatedly. Each time he glanced at the screen and silenced it, his agitation growing more visible. Sir, do you need to take that? Officer Martinez asked. No, it's just business, Gregory said tersely. As they walked back to the parking lot, his phone rang again. This time, Linda caught a glimpse of the screen. No name, just a number. He declined it with visible frustration. Fine, whatever, I need to deal with this, Gregory said, fumbling for Daniel's keys. As he pulled them out, another keychain fell to the asphalt with a metallic clink. Linda's eyes were drawn to it. Among the keys was one with a small, white plastic label. She could just make out an O at the beginning, but before she could read more, Gregory snatched it up. Nothing, just keys to office storage units, he said, pocketing them quickly. Too quickly. Linda and Daniel returned to the Whitmore estate in her Honda. In the garage, a middle-aged man in a crisp white shirt was polishing Gregory's Mercedes. That's Ray Delane, Daniel explained. Dad's driver, been with him for years. Ray approached them with a warm, genuine smile. Mr. Daniel, good to see you. Hey, Ray, Daniel shook his hand. This is Mrs. Carroll, Melissa's mother. Ma'am, Ray nodded respectfully, his kind eyes crinkling. I'm very sorry for your troubles. As Linda prepared to leave with the box of Melissa's things, she heard voices near the front gate. Ray was talking to a younger man, stocky, with dark hair and a nervous energy. Linda pretended to arrange the box in her trunk, observing them. The man wore a gold chain necklace with large letter pendants. Even from a distance, she could make out a prominent O, and was that an S at the end? Her pulse quickened. She saw Ray reach for the necklace, his lips moving. The younger man stepped back, but Ray was insistent, pulling the chain over his head. Through her partially open window, she caught fragments of their conversation. "Boss said," Ray's voice was firm, "don't wear this." Then with a grip that belied his earlier gentleness, Ray seized the man's arm and steered him toward Gregory's Mercedes. Linda's hands trembled. Otis, the O and S on that necklace. It couldn't be a coincidence. She made a split-second decision. Instead of turning toward home, she turned right, following the Mercedes at an inconspicuous distance. Her heart pounded. The Mercedes headed toward downtown Homestead, pulling into the parking lot of a modern office building, Whitmore Industries. Linda parked across the street. Within minutes, Gregory emerged, stride purposeful, and exchanged car keys with Ray. Gregory slid into his Mercedes where the young man, Otis, remained in the passenger seat. Ray got into Daniel's BMW. The two cars pulled out of the lot. The BMW turned back toward the Whitmore estate. The Mercedes turned south. Linda followed. They left Homestead's commercial district, the neighborhoods growing sparser, until Gregory's Mercedes took the familiar turnoff, the entrance to Everglades National Park, the same route she'd driven that morning. Her chest tightened. Why would Gregory bring this mysterious man here? She followed them to the Ernest F. Coe Visitor Center parking lot, finding a spot where she could observe. Gregory and Otis exited the vehicle and headed toward a marked trail. Linda waited a full minute before following, a park brochure held open like any other tourist. For half an hour, they followed the standard path. But then, as the landscape changed to the rockier terrain of the Long Pine Key region, Gregory and Otis veered off onto an unmarked path. Linda's heart raced, but she followed, creeping forward, using limestone boulders as cover. After 20 minutes of difficult hiking, she heard voices. Through a thick stand of saw palmetto, she saw them in a small, isolated clearing. "Point to the exact spot," Gregory's voice carried clearly. "I need to know precisely where you buried the bitch's body. If the police get close, I need to be prepared." Linda's blood ran cold. Otis walked to a section of ground heavy with brush. "Here! I buried Melissa right here, 6 feet down, just like you said." The casual way he said her daughter's name made Linda bite her lip to keep from crying out. "Good," Gregory said. "What about me? You said you'd help me," Otis pleaded. "You were stupid to use your real name on that lingerie card," Gregory snapped. "I have an offer, 2 choices. 1, disappear. Leave Florida tonight. I won't give you a cent. 2, go to the police. Confess that you murdered the newlyweds. Tell them you were Melissa's ex-boyfriend, crazy with jealousy. Take full responsibility. I'll pay you $300,000 offshore. Your family can access it. You'll give everyone closure. You'll never mention my name." Linda watched in horror as Otis slowly nodded. "Okay, I'll do it. For the money." "Smart choice. Now let's go." As their footsteps faded, Linda pulled out her cell phone. The signal was weak, but it connected. "Detective?" "It's Linda Carroll," she whispered frantically. "I'm at Everglades National Park, Long Pine Key area. I followed Gregory Whitmore. He's with a man named Otis. I heard everything. Otis buried Melissa's body here. Gregory's paying him to take the blame." "Mrs. Carroll, what you've done is extremely dangerous." Pram's voice was urgent. "Give me your location. Stay where you are. Stay hidden. We're on our way." The line went dead. Linda stared at the spot Otis had indicated. Her daughter was there. Tears streamed down her face as she began to make her way back, her only thought to trust that help and justice were finally coming. The park parking lot was a sea of flashing lights. Linda saw Otis in handcuffs seated on the curb. Gregory was arguing with Detective Pram. "He's lying to you!" Linda cried, pushing past an officer. "Whatever he's telling you is a lie!" Gregory's eyes snapped to her, his face a mask of fury. "This woman has been stalking me! I demand you arrest her for harassment!" I heard everything, Linda insisted, addressing Pram. I heard him offer Otis $300,000 to take the blame for both murders. Pram's expression hardened. He turned to Otis. Sir, what's your name? Otis looked from Gregory to the police, sweat beading on his forehead. I want a lawyer. That's your right, Pram said. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to show us what Mrs. Carroll claims you showed Mr. Whitmore. The wait was excruciating. After nearly an hour, Pram's radio crackled. He listened, his face grim, then approached Linda, who was now sitting with Eleanor and Daniel, who had just arrived. The field team has discovered human remains at the location indicated. Eleanor let out a strangled sob. Gregory, hearing the news, bolted, but Daniel intercepted him. As officers restrained his father, they searched him. A small keyring fell to the asphalt, the same one Linda had seen earlier, a key with a white tag. In the glare of the police lights, the letters were clear. O-T-I-S. Mr. Whitmore, Pram said, picking it up. Care to explain why you have a key labelled with the name of someone you claim not to know? Eleanor snatched the key from the detective's hand. Her face went pale. This looks like a key to the memorial house, the columbariums where we keep family ashes. An hour later, at the station, the full, horrifying story spilled out. Otis Dunhull, his bravado gone, confessed everything. He and his father, Ray Delane, had been on Gregory's payroll for years. Gregory, enraged by the elopement, had ordered them to stage a robbery and kill Melissa. But Brandon returned early from a walk on the beach, finding them with his wife's body. They had no choice but to kill him, too. Gregory, the master of control, orchestrated the entire cover-up, hiding his own son's ashes in the family mausoleum under the name of one of his hired killers. Linda sat in a small waiting room, the chaos of the station a distant hum. The terrible weight of not knowing, a burden she had carried for 4,380 days, was finally lifted. The grief would never leave, she knew that. But it was no longer tangled with the poison of doubt. Her daughter hadn't abandoned her. Melissa had been stolen, murdered for the crime of loving above her station. But she had died loved. Brandon had loved her enough to defy his father, to choose her over a fortune, to die trying to protect her. Eleanor and Daniel entered the room. Eleanor, her face shattered, embraced Linda. "I'm so sorry for everything." "It happened to all of us," Linda said, her voice steady. "We are all victims of his pride." In that moment, united by a truth that was darker than any lie, they were no longer from different worlds. They were simply two mothers, bound together by the shared, unbearable loss of their children and the long, slow first steps toward peace.